Hey guys, just a couple of things I want to go over before we start the episode. I will be away in the end of June till the beginning of August. I'm going to be on rotation in Germany, which I'm really excited about, but unfortunately I won't really be able to release or record any new podcasts between now and then, so this might be the last one for a few weeks. But don't fear, my old ones are on archive, so if you guys really miss my voice and want to hear me, feel free to listen to some old podcasts. Hopefully I'll be able to come back with some new guests. I am friends with a few German pharmacists that I'll be visiting with while I'm over there, so hopefully I'll get some good interviews and I can post those when I get back. I also want to remind you guys that I am starting the new podcast, Living Room Language, in August. So stay tuned for that one. I'd appreciate it if you guys check that out. I think it's going to be a really good one. I'm just talking to a few different people about being on it right now, and like I said, hopefully that'll be up in August at some point, but I will keep you guys updated as I learn more about that. So today's episode was really cool. I was able to work with a recent graduate of the University of Florida who is a floater pharmacist at my rotation sites, and she was kind enough to agree to be on the podcast and just give a little bit of insight on what it's like to transition from 4 years of school and pharmacy school and all the studying and testing to being in the workforce and, having all the responsibility just on you. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Anna Javed. Hey guys, so we're doing a special edition of the Capsule Production Podcast. We're actually doing it on site during our lunch break. So I want to welcome Dr. Anna Javed. She's a recent graduate from UF and just started with CVS Target not too long ago. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Of course. So I thought this would be a good podcast because a lot of us are getting ready to graduate and we actually have to start working like for real. It's no more tests, no more school. So I just kind of want to go over some basics with Anna about how to kind of transition into the workforce. So what was like the biggest part of transitioning? Like, was that kind of hard transitioning from school to actual work, or was it weird?
It was very weird at first. It was a huge learning curve, especially with me. I hadn't worked in retail as a technician or even at a hospital as a technician at all. So everything was brand new to me. So coming from doing tests, quizzes, and just being in the books for the past 4 years was... it was very different just jumping into the working environment. So it's a huge learning curve, and you do learn a lot when you actually start working.
I gotcha. So what was the biggest hurdle like going in? So I'm sure it's kind of hard. Like, it's all on you now. It's not like you have a preceptor to go to or something like that.
Right. It's a huge liability. And so everything is on you. You're liable for your technicians and basically your store, managing everything there. The biggest hurdle, I think, would be probably just interacting with customers. That I feel like it wasn't very well trained on in school. And so coming from an environment where you're tested on like all these big words, and then you have to come to an environment where you're just talking to patients, it's very different. And so that was something that I struggled with, trying to explain to patients what's going on with their medications, the drug interactions. It was hard for me to simplify it in terms that they could understand.
I guess.
So some of those kind of things.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. So you like you said, you take a lot of tests and exams, you do a lot of homework, and you're used to talking to your friends that know a lot about pharmacy, but now you have to direct it towards someone that knows nothing about pharmacy.
Exactly. And things like this where people ask you questions about where things are or over-the-counter recommendations, that was something that was very new to me. Even though we had touched base on it in classes sometimes, it just, when you're on the spot, it's hard because you can't reference a book. You can't just open a book in front of a patient and start researching and taking your time. You kind of have to answer their questions and kind of move on, especially with all the busy stuff going back behind the counter too.
Yeah.
So it's hard to manage that.
So yeah, they kind of put you on the spot. So
right.
So have you worked in retail before, or is this like your...
I had not worked in retail before. This was my very first time in pharmacy, like on the job. I had done my IPPEs through school that were required, and that was pretty much all the experience that I had in retail, and one rotation in APPEs. That
Okay.
was retail.
So what kind of like resources do you use? So I mean, in school, we have basically the professors, our friends. We have this whole list of litany of things the school gives us. Like, what do you go to most in retail world?
So my favorite app that I use is Epocrates because it's free and it's a pretty good app to find whatever information you need, at least in retail. And then through my job, we have access online to several other resources like Clint Farm, MicroMedX, so I can always refer to those if I need more detailed information about medications or conditions. The important thing is really to know where to find answers and how to get access to websites that can answer your questions. So when you're starting out, I would, ask your boss or whoever to see what kind of resources are available to you on that job, and also search for apps and things that might help you out a little bit extra. And I know within my district we have a GroupMe, so all the pharmacists in our region have a big group text where if we have questions or get stuck on something, we can text and somebody will usually reply within a reasonable amount of time. So try to get connections and know people that can answer your questions, whether it's within your workplace or friends that you have that have gone on to do different things. Just keep in touch with people.
Okay, so people are a great resource.
Absolutely.
So what was your first day like? So I mean, did they just hand you the key and they're like, all right, here you go, or was it like a little easier to transition in where you're working with another pharmacist for a while? Or?
Nope, it was, here's the key, it's just you, good luck.
Wow, okay.
I had a pretty rough first day. I questioned whether this was right for me when I finished my shift. It was pretty rough. But you learn the ropes, and you have technicians to help you out and other people to help you out with whatever you need. So you might get stuck, and it might be a little bit rough at first, but you get the hang of it sooner or later.
Okay, so was it rough in terms of it was just busy, or just had like a lot of problems you weren't sure how to deal with? Or
Right. It was mostly, my problem was that I was placed at a busy store, and I didn't know how to handle some customers and their requests. So I had to reach out to my technician, see what we could do about it. And that kind of made me feel like I wasn't really smart enough or cut out for the job.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to realize that you're not going to always know everything. So you just have to know who to reach out to and what to do in certain situations.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So like an example, I can give you an example. My first day on the job, we received our order, hadn't put it away or checked it in or anything. I had a mom that was trying to pick up her medication for her son she had been waiting on since the weekend. And she was upset that other patients could, simply come in, bring their prescriptions, drop them off, pick them up in a couple minutes, 15 minutes or whatever. And whereas she has to wait the whole weekend and still can't get her medication. And so I said, I responded in a way that wasn't the best that I could have. What I should have done was probably look for the medication in the box, find it, fill it real quick. But I went off on a tangent and said, well, yeah, we have those medications in stock so we can fill them. So it was just a messy situation.
Well, yeah, that does sound kind of crazy. You don't want to mess with Mama Bear. So you said you didn't really have a whole bunch of retail experience. So you did your PPE, and then you had one rotation during your APPEs.
Right.
So what other rotations did you do that were kind of cool on your APPE rotations?
One of my favorite rotations was trauma rotation at Orlando Regional Medical Center. I saw some pretty crazy things there. Some patients would come in with, there were a lot of motorcycle accidents, so we would see a lot of those, and then, having to watch one of the workers call parents to let them know what happened. Their child is in the hospital. It's pretty intense, especially when you see it in real life. You hear about stories all the time on the news, but when you're actually there in the trauma room, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's kind of surreal,
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely, and just the craziness going around. We also had a patient that tried to commit suicide, stabbed himself multiple times in his belly and the side and in his thighs as well.
Oh my God.
So trying to maintain all that blood, is just blood on the floor. trying to make sure that he's breathing okay. Just very intense experiences, especially in the trauma room. People trying to do crazy stunts, gun accidents. You see all sorts of things.
Is that like a, what do they call it, level 1 trauma center or something like that?
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
so yeah, they're pretty used to that, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and they also dealt with. I actually dealt with some of the Pulse victims that were there. So I did my rotation afterward, after Pulse happened, and some of the patients from that tragedy were still in the OR.
Wow.
Or, sorry, not the OR, the units.
I gotcha. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So they were there for that long.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how were you like mentally preparing for that? I mean, like you go in like the first week and you see that kind of stuff. Like, you know, you get your couple of days off. Like, are you like, can I go back, or like should I go back, or how are you like dealing with that?
Yeah, there's no preparation for that. It was the first time that I had kind of dealt with something like that, so there was nothing I could have done to prepare. But it was certainly interesting.
Okay, so retail looks like it's a little bit more of a tame environment compared to RMC. It's not a trauma center or anything, but it does have some crazy aspects. So how do you deal with like C2s? I know that can be like kind of a dangerous or like a taboo topic. So what is your process?
So as a floater, it's a little bit hard to know which C2 prescriptions are actually needed, which ones aren't, if they're shady, faulty. So I have to be on the lookout extra hard for the bad prescriptions. And as a floater, you don't really know your patients all the time that are regular patients that fill with you. So first step that I go to is e-forcing each prescription, check their profiles to make sure that they're not overfilling or filling early.
Can you describe what eForce is for someone that doesn't really know what that is yet? Or
yeah, so eForce is a database system that Florida has that tracks all the controlled prescriptions that patients fill, and it'll give you information about their last fill, how much they filled for, the doctor's name, the pharmacy they filled at, whether they used cash or insurance. So it gives you all that information. That way you can form a better picture of their filling history and decide whether you're going to fill for that patient or not.
Okay, so it's like a statewide patient profile, basically.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So you said you check that, and then you can just kind of go on from there, like just based on what you see?
Yeah, based on what I see there on eForce, and then their profile with CVS, if they have one or not. That's the next consideration. And also just looking at the prescription, handwriting, make sure there's not multiple handwritings, see if a previous pharmacy has written their address or e-force them, signatures, make sure everything on the prescription is absolutely 100% correct that needs to be there. And then after that, I'll make the decision also based off of the patient's kind of behavior and their attitude as well. That makes a huge difference in whether I'll decide to fill for them or not.
Okay, so you have to look for a bunch of little red flags, and I'm sure you kind of gain experience with that as you go on.
Yeah, it's definitely something that comes with time.
You said you're floating. Did you request to do that, or is that just the common way they start interns or pharmacists rather? Or?
Since I was very new to the company and I hadn't interned or anything, I became a floater. Sometimes you can get a staff position if you've kind of been at that store interning there for a long time and if they have something open. So it all depends on availability.
Gotcha.
So you'll probably start out as a floater and eventually get your own store.
Okay. So what entails being a floater? So you just bounce around store to store, is there traveling involved, or what encompasses that?
Definitely. I think it also matters kind of how your supervisor is and your district is, how big it is. So our district spreads from Orlando all the way up to Jacksonville. There's a store in Georgia and one in Alabama as well. So I do have to travel pretty far to go to some stores sometimes. So 2-hour commute it's started to become normal for me.
Oh, wow. 2 hours.
I do try to request that I get put in stores that are closer to home, but if there's a need, I have to go to the store that they need me at.
Okay. Have you worked in Georgia or Alabama or any of those?
No,
Okay.
I haven't, especially since I'm not licensed there.
Okay.
In those states, I don't think I'd be able to work there just yet.
I gotcha. But you do have the potential to be basically anywhere in that region in Florida that you're licensed for?
Correct, yes.
Wow, okay. And do you get a lot of heads up about that, or is it just kind of
I do have a set schedule, so I do get my schedule, well in advance, about a month and a half or so ahead of time. So I do know what to expect and where I'll be.
Okay. So you started, so how long have you been with the company for?
I've been with
roughly?
CBS for about a year.
Okay, so you've been here for a year. You've been out of school for a year now. So, like, what's something you kind of wish you knew, like, before you started, or as you were graduating, you're like, oh, I wish I could go back and know this before I started?
I wish that our school had a little bit more focus on retail aspect of pharmacy. It was highly clinical, and so I didn't realize that, a lot of those things that we learn that are clinical don't use so much in retail. And so I really wish that they had some courses or kind of like classes that taught more about retail, insurance processing, or economics. So that would have been really helpful, and I think I probably would have had a better idea of what I'm getting into if I had known some of that. So that, and then pearls of wisdom, I guess, just, in retail from people's experiences would have been nice to know.
Okay.
And then I also wish I had known that the market was going to be really saturated when I got into school. That was one of the things I didn't really realize that was going to be so saturated by the time I graduate. But I don't think that would have swayed my decision to go into pharmacy school.
Okay, so you've just been a little more informed, so you kind of had a heads up that you're
Right.
going to have a harder time finding a job, or you got to know somebody, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. So what are some cons? Like, what are things that you're really just not crazy about with as far as retail goes?
So some of the cons about retail are that you're working long hours on your feet, don't really get much time to sit down. If you're at a busy store, sometimes you'll be lucky if you get a lunch break, but a lot of the times I don't get to go take a pee break or a lunch break all day. So that's pretty rough. And then also on top of that, when you have to deal with nasty customers, you have to remember to maintain a positive attitude even through all of that. So at the end of the day, you just have to remind yourself that not everybody knows what you do, knows everything that you do, and kind of just move on from there. You just have to let it go, move on, and get on with your day.
I gotcha. So just focus on the good parts, I guess, too. And
Absolutely. There's definitely more rewarding aspects than there are cons.
that does kind of suck, though. I couldn't imagine having to go like all day without really eating. Like, I would definitely get hangry, but
It happens.
I'm sure you get used to that part.
Yes, you get used to it.
So what about pros? Like, what makes you excited about coming to work every day?
The pros are definitely seeing the look on people's face when, you save them money, you let them know what the cheaper price is for their drugs, and they're always very grateful for what you do, whether it's saving money or helping out with their medication regimens, trying to simplify things down, or making that phone call to the doctor to double check something to verify if there's an interaction. So people are always grateful that you take out the time to, spend on them and their medications and helping them out. So it's always rewarding to see that. That's what gets me through my day. Pros are you get to make money, a lot of money.
So you're not going negative anymore.
Exactly. No more negative, paying off those loans, getting out of debt, and just having extra money to spend, not being broke is a very nice feeling.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
So you pretty much just, see all the fruit of your work come into sight. So it's very rewarding.
Like in school, it's a lot of clinical, as you mentioned before, but do you really use a lot of that clinical knowledge, or do you have like a really certain subsection of knowledge that you use just for retail pharmacy? Or
a lot of the clinical aspects you don't use very much. Most things that you really need to know are like brand versus generic names, side effects of the medications, interactions that are, more serious versus a little bit less serious. So there's not a whole lot that you use that you learn in school, honestly. A lot of it involves business and maintaining your business, numbers, making profits. So that's one thing that I wish we had learned a lot more in school about.
So yeah, my first 3 weeks on this community rotation, I really noticed that business piece was pretty big. My preceptor was just showing me like a breakdown of different cost savings, where their costs are kind of going, like extra expenditures they need to be cutting, and I wish they really would have focused more on business, or at least I had better business sense. But
yeah, they do try to help guide you with that a little bit when you're working, depending on which store you're at and what their goals are. So they do try to help you out, but it's something that you don't really come in knowing. You have to learn as you go.
Gotcha. I noticed they really push on like vaccines now, which is a good thing. How is that working out for you? Because I know community pharmacists are more prone to do more vaccinations and stuff. So
I love giving vaccines. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. And just talking to people about vaccinations in general when I'm giving them a shot. So if there's, an awkward moment of silence, I'll just start talking about vaccinations and promoting immunizations and health. So I really like that aspect. It does get frustrating when you have patients that don't want to get their vaccines, especially for something, some silly reasons sometimes that they might not understand, like, oh, I got the flu even though I got my flu shot. So I try to help them understand what's going on, what stereotypes there are about vaccines, and try to guide them a little bit better about those.
Okay, so just focusing on the patient education part.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so just wrapping up because our lunch break is almost over. What advice do you have for any pharmacists that are about to graduate and have like a ton of student loans?
All right, so with student loans, one option is to continue living like you're poor, living frugally still. When I graduated, I set aside one paycheck towards loans, so about $3,000 every month towards loan.
Okay.
And then my other paycheck for that month I would use towards whatever I needed, my rent and all those expenses. So that was one option. Just make sure that you make your payments on time. Just so it doesn't hurt your credit score and affect you from, buying bigger purchases that need your credit score down the road, like houses or cars. So you want to make sure that you keep a good credit score by paying your monthly payments on time. And then one other piece of advice towards loans is that you can always try to refinance your loan with somebody that might give you a better rate. So that way you don't accrue as much interest over time.
Okay, that's actually
all I could think of.
Really great advice. We appreciate that, yeah, because we're going to go out with a ton of loans, and that's good advice, so I appreciate that. I appreciate you being on the podcast, by the way. I know you got to be back to work, so...
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Brandon.
No problem. All right, thanks, guys. I will see you next week.
Well, that's the end of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thank you again to Dr. Anna Javed for being on the podcast. I think she had some really good insights, and I had a great time working with her and talking with her on the podcast. I want to thank my team at Capsule Production. Thank you to Amy, Jeff, and Maher for making this podcast possible. I also want to give another thanks to everyone that donated on the GoFundMe. I was able to raise enough money to get an LLC for Capsule Production and enough money to get another hosting account for the new podcast, Living Room Language, that I will be releasing in August. So I'm very excited about that. And I just want to apologize for all the background noise. I was on site, and I was lucky enough to have Anna give up her lunch break to talk to me on the podcast. So if you can listen past the noise, I think she had some great advice on there. And hopefully I'll be getting more interviews while I'm on my rotations on site. So look out for those. Lastly, I just want to thank Sephiros for the music. This song is called Celestial, and you can find it at freestockmusic.com. And I will talk to you guys when I get back from Germany.